Insieme per la vittoria!
Insieme!
Insieme! Silenzio, my friends! Silenzio! Grazie. Do you know what brings us here tonight? Honor. Viere de Pazzi slanders my family's name and forces his own miseries upon us. If we...
Enough of your nonsense, Grullo!
Buonasera, Viera. We were just talking about you. I'm surprised to see you here. I thought the Pazzi hired others to do their dirty work.
It's your family that cries for guards when there's trouble. Cotardo. Afraid to handle things yourself?
Your sister seemed quite satisfied with the handling I gave her earlier.
Uccidetelo!
Okay, we have ourselves our first real fight. So, first things first, unlike Desmond, we can counter with unarmed. We can also strafe and taunt. I'll show what taunt looks like a little bit later. Strafe I forgot to use. Ah, satisfying. But a couple things. Top left, of course, is Ezio's health. Each of those gets hollowed out before it vanishes, so technically he's got twice that many blows, I guess you could say. Bad guys, you can see the red dots above their head or their health as well.
Hey! Behind you!
Federico! What are you doing here?
I wanted to see if baby brother had finally learned how to fight.
And?
You have style. But endurance is what counts. Let's see how many of them you can ruin before they get the best of you.
Well, whether you win or lose, you get the same result in this fight. So, let's go ahead and win. Yeah. So we learn a few other tricks later on, but for now, this is okay. I seem to keep on getting those same counters. There are a few neat things you can do with unarmed, but a lot of it seems to be luck reliant. You'll see one later on that comes from just a regular punching combo I use. Never gets old. But yeah, when you grab people, depending upon what button you use, whether it be fist, head, or feet, you'll headbutt them, punch them, or knee them. Or just throw them. There we go. Finish him off. Come on. Now, there's a couple more left. You can see with the red markers. But first, let's see what taunt looks like. He's got a few lines, but they're kind of quiet. But I'll do those a little more in the future. Let's wrap this guy up so we can finish this. Family technique. Yeah. Desmond learned it from somewhere. Damn right.
Fall back! Fall back!
Hold on.
What? We've almost won this.
Your lip.
Just a scratch.
Let the doctor decide.
It's not necessary. Besides, I've no money for this doctor of yours.
Wasted it on women and wine, huh?
I'd hardly call it wasted. Lend me some florins then. Or have you done the same?
Search them. There's bound to be something in their pockets.
And another thing, we can loot bodies. Something we'll be getting into momentarily. This game has a bit of an information database on characters and places. So I don't have to go digging around to find out where the hell we are or what we're looking at. 15 Florence. Oh, this is going to be a while. So first things first, let's, in the meantime, let's read up on our protagonists.
Va bene. That should be enough. Let's get out of here before the guards arrive.
And something else in this that's different from the first game, everything is chopped apart into separate missions. And that wrapped that up in... Oh! Before we proceed with our glowy brother, there's something I need to show you real fast. First things first, let me see here. Top right, you see carry loot. It now says pick up body. Gotta keep the streets clean. Vaya con Dios, Marco. Ah, yes. And speaking of where we are and keeping the streets clean, this right here is an interesting place that has its own entry. And here's a real-life picture of it. So yeah, the bridge that we're seeing right here in-game, or right here rather, is known as the Ponte Vecchio, and that means Old Bridge. The river we are crossing, as it mentioned, is the Arno River. This bridge is rather interesting above all others because it's one of the oldest of its kind that still stands today. The Ponte Vecchio is said to have been built over where one of ancient Rome's great trade roads crossed the Arno, and this one was known as the Via Cassia. A couple of interesting tidbits I saw mention of. Firstly, there has been mention on a few different websites and places that the term bankruptcy could have been derived from the markets here. In order to sell along this bridge, you'd need a table to set up shop. In order to sell, a fee was required. If this fee or tax was not paid, the guards in charge would basically break the merchant's table. And banco in Italian is goods or wares. Rotto means broken. The phrase coined for the punishment was banco rotto. However, table in Italian sounds similar to the word for bank, which is banca. Bancarotta, of course, translates to broken bank. Am I saying this is where the phrase came from? Not necessarily, but I think it's a neat little coincidence. Oh, and also, when the Nazis occupied Florence in World War II, they destroyed all the bridges except this one, at the request of Hitler particularly. Not really sure why he did that, but it's the only one that still stands of its age. And this right here that we're climbing is the Torre dei Manelli that was mentioned in the note. in the mid-16th century, the Torre dei Manelli was going to be forced into moving due to a corridor known as the Vasari corridor that's going to be built along this way. The family, or the Manellis, refused to budge, and as a result, the Vasari corridor was still built, but it actually has a bend, and it goes around the Torre dei Manelli. Take a look at the picture right after this. Okay, let's get this going. Time for the next mission.
Hurry, Ezio. The sooner we're done with the doctor, the sooner we can sleep.
So the previous mission was introduction to looting, the one before that was fighting. And this is just, pardon me, just a little bit of free running. Real basic though. And I don't know what I was doing there for a moment. Whoops. No idea what to say there. Okay. And he's just over here. Oh, and another famous building. Right here. Mm-hmm. And I'll go ahead and leave the menu in this time so you can actually see what I'm navigating through. Sancta Trinita. This place has an interesting bit of artwork inside of it. It's known as the Sassetti Chapel. It was painted by a fella by the name of Domenico Geladaio, who was a famous painter in the late 15th century and whose last name I am sure I'm mispronouncing. It was commissioned by Francesco Sassetti, who worked for the Medici family directly. The paintings cover 3 walls of the chapel and are renditions of 6 different scenes from the past involving Saint Francis Assisi, the founder of the Franciscan order. First, you have the renunciation of worldly goods. A young Saint Francis casts aside his assets and clothing in public to show his willingness to join the church. His father is seen angrily opposing this. The background depicts either Geneva or Lyon. The confirmation of the Franciscan rule. St. Francis is meeting here with Pope Honorius III as his Franciscan order is being sanctioned. The foreground is in Rome, depicting the inside of the Basilica of St. John Lateran. The background, oddly enough, is of the Piazza del Signoria, Palazzo Vecchio, and the Loggia del Lanzi, which are located in Florence, and it's said to be symbolic of how Florence itself was seen as rivaling Rome or Jerusalem in importance, at least in the eyes of humanists of the era. The test of fire. St. Francis preaches before the Ottoman Sultan, Al-Kamil. In order to demonstrate how pure spirit he was, Al-Kamil asked St. Francis to walk through the fire, and St. Francis was happy to oblige. The miracle of the stigmata. St. Francis kneels before a crucified depiction of Christ to receive the divine sign. The city painted on the right is Pisa, as indicated by the Duomo and the Leaning Tower. The death of St. Francis. This depicts the funeral of St. Francis, placed inside of a larger church. He's surrounded by a number of figures, but it is believed that the father with the 2 children on the right are connected to Francesco Sassetti somehow. Finally, the resurrection of the boy. This depicts what is said to have been a miracle performed by the spirit of St. Francis, or rather posthumously. A boy fell from the Palazzo Spiniferroni and was pronounced dead, only to later be resurrected, just up and got up and he was perfectly fine. The 5 women you see are said to be Francesco Sassetti's daughters, with their husbands on the right foreground. Now you might wonder why I decided to do a segment on this, but it has some importance aside from being a neat series of paintings. The altarpiece has paintings of the 2 primary donors kneeling toward it in the fashion of what was referred to as donor paintings usually. And namely, you have Francesco Sassetti and someone named Nora Corsi. The altarpiece itself was known as the Adoration of the Shepherds, also painted by Ghirlandaio. It is said to be one of the masterpieces of Florentine paintings, as well as his masterpiece, his absolute best painting. He was one of the first artists to really nail a 3-dimensional sort of style in how he painted through the use of, shading and scale. He was one of the first to really nail it with good accuracy. Also, this Ghirlandaio mentored many great artists, one of which being named Francesco Granacci. And for a brief period before his death, he apprenticed another fellow who'd become quite popular, and this fellow went by the name of Michelangelo. Okay.
Come, amici! A fresh sheep's urine and...
Ben trovato, Doctor.
Fratelli auditori, why am I not surprised? You've made quite a mess of yourself, young man.
It's nothing, really.
You must help him. That pretty face is his only asset.
Fottiti.
There we are. Now get out of here.
Grazie.
This way. Quite a night.
Indeed. I only wish they were all as much fun. Oh, wait. They are.
We should head home, Ezio. Father's sure to be wondering where we've gone.
Yes. I'd rather avoid a lecture.
Up for a little race, then?
To where?
Roof of that church. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
And there's a little more advanced free running, and I got stuck on the ledge. But it's no big deal. Yeah, he talks a lot. It's no big deal because he's kinda slowish. And even though I fell behind so darn much, I still kinda finish him with a bit of breathing room up here.
Come on, then. This way.
Where are you going?
You'll see.
Now just enjoy the scenery and enjoy the music. Music's probably one of my favorite parts of this game.
It is a good life we lead, brother.
The best. May it never change.
And may it never change us. All right. Enough of that. We really should head home. Let's go.
Wait.
What? Ezio, let Christina sleep.
There will be time enough for that. Later.
Ah.
Nightcap. That's a pretty tame name for what he's after in this mission. Whatever. Okay. A little bit of a familiar perch here. So as you can see by our map, which causes slowdown on the 360, it is empty. But much like the first Assassin's Creed, after we handle this, we're going to have a little bit more visibility. Let's go ahead and open that up real fast. And I'll get to those viewpoints as we need to head towards them in the missions to come. No sense in knocking it all out at once, and our destination ain't too far. Ah, it's the hay bale.
So it's Vieri. I better hide.
Keep looking! He couldn't have gotten far!
Don't shove your boss. That's not polite at all. This might be a while. So let's just kinda get cozy for a few moments. The Doctor in Black. Although we see this fella on the street side and he seems like a decent enough person, these guys were a terrible thing to see if you were new in town, so to speak. They're known as plague doctors. And as the saying goes, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. If a region was having a run-in with the bubonic plague, plague doctors were hired. These guys treated people of all social levels, in spite of being created originally as geared towards a service for the poor. And unfortunately, they were usually, in best case scenarios, second-rate doctors. The vast majority had almost no formal training as physicians. They couldn't perform proper surgery, or, well, what was considered proper surgery for the era at least, and the ones with actual experience on those fronts were usually doctors who owned a practice in the past that fell through. Something that needs to be driven home on this front. These were failed doctors in the years of the Black Plague. Now, given how absolutely batshit crazy medicine was back then, you needed to be pretty horrible in order to be viewed as a failure of a doctor in comparison. But I'm sure there were other reasons some of them had to go to it, financial or what have you maybe. But anyhow, some of the doctors that weren't former failures were ones that had almost no experience past their studies, and they couldn't get their foot in the door any other way. You probably don't want to hear your doctor say the words, "never done this one before," prior to a serious procedure, so I don't think I need to go further into why it was a bad idea to have these guys doing such involved procedures. Now, there was a third type of people who were plague doctors, though. These guys had absolutely no medical experience and no knowledge. There were enough of them that they actually developed a nickname for them. Most other parts of Europe referred to them as empirics. I don't think I need to elaborate on why it was bad to wind up with one of these guys as your resident quack. Now, anyhow, the plague doctor was a bottom-rung job in the field of medicine. Job benefits included treating people dying of the plague, helping dispose of the bodies at times, and a good chance of contracting the disease itself. If you managed to survive the plague, well, you were put in a quarantine for a very, very, very long time until you were proven to be safe to others. The pay was rather terrible as well, kind of what you'd expect from a communal doctor originally created for the poor. Now, the typical pay was around 30 florins a month. I couldn't find any way to equate that to what it'd be worth, but from what I gather, that was not that much to live off of at all. Now, plus, the doctor was gambling with his life for the duration. It's not like you were taking a simple summer job. There was a very, very good chance that you would die doing this. Making matters worse, it was very common for city administrators and leaders to back out of these contracts to pay the doctors altogether. As a result, the bargaining in the initial stages was often very important and pretty heated, apparently. Now, the outfit. The outfit's origins seem to have mixed claims. Most sources cite a guy by the name of Charles de l'Orme as the person who first pulled the whole ensemble together in 1619. However, in the city of Pavia in 1479, a fellow by the name of Giovanni de Ventura was the resident plague doctor, and he went by the moniker of the Beak Doctor due to the fact that he wore a beaked mask. Now, basically, the mask was utilized by plague doctors since very early on, although not every single one of them wore one. Most of them usually did. But the rest of the outfit in particular wasn't a general uniform per se until l'Orme in the early 17th century. Now, let's get to the specifics of this fancy little outfit. Firstly, the beaked mask. It was fashioned after how the Romans interpreted the Grim Reaper to have looked. As for the function, well, to get into this, you need to think back of the situation of the era. The population densities around this point in time were in a crazy upswing. General hygiene was horrible, and folks had no clue about germs and what have you. Case in point, when the bubonic plague was having a field day with most people, there was no mental concept of it being caused by rats and their fleas. It was applied to something known as the miasmatic theory of disease, which stated that disease was spread by miasma, or bad air. The mask was to serve as a crude gas mask, and the beak usually housed some fragrance. Now, most people stop at the gas mask part and the fragrance, but the thing is, this wasn't strictly for the comfort of the doctor, even though they usually weren't around very pleasant smelling things. These herbs or fragrances tied into the miasmatic theory. They were believed to combat the miasma, which people thought helped you contract the plague. So basically you were staving off bad smells with something that smelled better. And additionally, these fragrances would be stashed all over the plague doctor's person, like inside of their actual clothing. Now, the eye holes. The eye holes were covered with a glass lens of some sort. And the thought here goes off to something a little crazier past miasmatic theory. And there was a notion at some point that stuck that people believed if you held eye contact long enough with someone with the plague, you would be infected as well. Now, moving down the list on the outfit, you have the black outfit. It was typically a gown of either leather or a waxed canvas. You also had waxed leather boots, gloves, a hat, and leggings, and they were also worn along with it. Nothing fancy from them aside from being stuffed with the fragrant goodies. Now, the final piece of the ensemble, the wooden cane. The premise? It was quite literally, as scientists refer to, as a poking stick. The doctors would use it to prod patients so they wouldn't have to touch them. Now, even though the knowledge of how the plague was spread from person to person was a little off-center, they definitely didn't want to directly touch someone who was afflicted, so at least they got that kind of right, I guess. Now, though they were usually not great doctors, there were some very famous folk in history that served as plague doctors. To name the most famous, Nostradamus. Yeah, Nostradamus was a plague doctor back in his heyday. Also, he advised against bloodletting or bleeding procedures, which doctors of the era were almost giddy to make use of. Another famous home remedy for the plague that he opposed was, get this, placing frogs on someone suffering from the plague in order to, quote, rebalance the humors. Yeah, plague doctors sucked. However, in spite of how I've lit into these guys, plague doctors weren't necessarily the dregs of society or anything of the sort. It was a horrendous job, and people usually took it because they had no alternatives. And there are numerous accounts of these guys serving last rites to the dying, bearing witness to wills, and easing the suffering of plague victims as best they could. The plague epidemics that scourged Europe in this era could be easily summarized as hell on earth, and these guys were ready to face it head on. Were they horrible doctors? Good God, yes, they were terrible doctors, but what society deemed to be good doctors were already pretty terrible. Plus, most respectable doctors might clear out when a plague gets nasty, whereas these guys hung around and they also offered their services to the public. Even though it tended to be lackluster at times, these guys provided medical services to people who otherwise would never have had a chance to receive it. So that's basically most of what I want to cover. Now, while still on this topic, I want to point something out. Though Assassin's Creed 2 did a phenomenal job with history, I'll be pointing out whatever inaccuracies I can spot at times. Now, firstly, the Plague Doctor, those patching up Ezio. That stuff didn't happen. The basic contract that Plague Doctors signed said that they were to only treat people suffering from the plague. Anyone else? Hands off. That was a huge no-no. Not only did this take business from general practitioners, but you also risked spreading the plague to someone who wasn't even afflicted with it. Plus, these guys were worse doctors than the norm, so that rule was probably doing you a big favor. Secondly, the outfit we saw was almost the run-of-the-mill uniform in the 17th century and onward. But these guys we see, well, they're a couple hundred years ahead of the scene. My, what trendsetters. You know, oddly enough, historians say that the Black Death, the bubonic plague's nastiest bout in the 14th century, actually helped kick off the economic boom of the Renaissance. It actually killed so many people that it made a huge void in the workforce, and they had to raise wages to actually attract laborers. So, some of you who know of your Italian explorers might realize that the Vespucci name is a little familiar. Well, we'll touch on that when the next little profile comes up. And I'm sorry about showing the profiles in the video, but as you can see, most of them require scrolling, and also a number of them get updated as we progress in the game. I kind of struggled with how to exactly do that, and honestly, this is the best way that came to mind.
Christina! Christina!
Who's there?
Me!
Oh, Ezio. I should have known.
May I come in?
Fine, but only for a minute.
A minute is all I need.
Indeed.
Well, wait, that came out wrong. Come here.
Oh, Ezio. Oh, Ezio. Ezio.
Christina! Christina! Celia, your tutor will be here soon. Come, my daughter. Is it really so terrible that... Figlio d'un cane! What is this?
Perdonate, messere! Chiedo venia!
I'll kill you!
No, that's not necessary.
Guards! Guards! Voglio la sua testa! Ora!
Uh-oh.
There's really no need for violence.
So we got some info on Christina, but we got a skedaddle. And you can see the arrows indicating where our pursuers are,
Be
and...
confused with someone else.
Woohoo!
She needed some help with some things.
Spread out, he can't be found.
I'm mostly innocent.
Maybe he's nearby.
Mm-hmm.
Jory. God. Capo would be
Ah,
happy.
so hard to find good help these days.
The city guard is recruiting
Hay bales are still our best buddies.
in city reserves. Why serve with mercenary condottieri when you could uphold the honor of the Republic?
Ah. Doctors will be using for healing, of course, and races are unlocked, and fuck races. I hate those things.
Next week's public mass with the cardinal will have to be cancelled due to a small outbreak of plague. Pray for his recovery and the confinement of the dread death to the
And just some basic stuff on the left here.
village he was in.
Ah, memories. A town crier of sorts. So let's head over this way. And the Amerigo Vespucci mentioned in Christina's profile was an explorer when Columbus was making his rounds. Not too long after America was discovered, Vespucci discovered Brazil. It wasn't certain whether he came across an island or some contiguous chunk of land connected to what Columbus found, so he led several voyages in the following years. His name came up a lot in popularity throughout Europe and publications and stuff, and a German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller was the first person in 1507 to draw the first world map showing North America as separate from Asia, and he decided to use America, naming it after Amerigo Vespucci. Ah, we'll climb that someday. But first, we have bigger fish to fry. We gotta meet with our objective over there. And I'm just taking the high ground because that fella down there, I don't want him to see me. So we just gotta be nice and gentle and jump and fucking down low to keep our balance, and we're on the other side without any hassle. And I didn't need to really take the rooftop in hindsight, but oh well. Let's take a look at this glowy man down here. Who is this man? Ah, Giovanni Auditore. Meet Ezio's old man.
Good morning, Father.
Come with me.
Is something wrong?
Do you think me blind and deaf, son? I know all about your fight with Vieri di Pazzi last night. And then this little visit to Christina. Your behavior is unacceptable. It reminds me of myself when I was your age. I assume these misadventures won't interfere with your work today.
No, Padre. Avete la mia parola.
I've prepared some documents here for Lorenzo di Medici to review. I need them delivered to him.
With haste, Father.
Return to me when it's done.
Well, I figured there's no harm in taking a gander at this. So let's just go ahead and do that.
Al magnifico Lorenzo di Medici, mio protettore e amico. I have done as requested and completed my investigation into the Milano incident. I can confirm for you that it extends far beyond dissatisfaction with Duca Galeazzo Sforza's rule. It is my belief that other parties, desirous of far greater gains, manipulated events in such a way as to achieve their goals without being revealed themselves. Lampugnani, Olgiati, and Visconti are guilty of the crime, to be sure. And they have met fitting ends for their betrayal. But several other noble families are implicated as well, our own Francesco de' Pazzi among them. Their cause and motive is not yet clear to me, but initial findings indicate a plan, the scope of which is sure to disturb you. Best we continue this conversation in person, as I am hesitant to put my suspicion to paper. Reply with a place and time, and I will meet you there. I have also ordered Francesco be held by the Gonfaloniere until we can clear up this matter. Yours in confidence, Giovanni.
Well, we just gotta deliver this letter, but let me see. That's a little ways southeast of here, and you know, I think we're at kind of a good stopping point. But first, hey, a treasure chest. Probably holds lots of money, no doubt. Oh, well, that's disappointing. Well, we'll deliver this next time. See y'all then.